So continuing on in chapter 28 would be the excretory system. There are several links between the circulatory and the excretory systems. Obviously, that the circulatory system facilitates the functions of the digestive system, respiratory, and excretory systems similarly, and it's at the transport system. But otherwise, we had this EPO, erythropoietin. I talked about it before, again, giving some airplay to the endocrine system. It's a hormone released by the kidneys, and kidneys are part of our excretory system. And this kind of connection here is that the hormone released by the kidneys regulates the amount of red blood cells in our body. The other thing, like I'd said, the circulatory system supports the function of the excretory system, and the kidneys are maybe the most important organs you have for maintaining homeostasis. The kidneys do two key things in maintaining homeostasis. They're basically going to get rid of the nitrogenous waste in your body, so that is excretion, and that's one way that the kidneys maintain homeostasis. And this other one is osmoregulation. So osmoregulation is a huge word, but is also a huge concept. It is the control of the concentration of everything in your body and the amount of water in your body. And so what osmoregulation is that that maintaining of homeostasis in your body as far as the concentration of everything and the amount of water in your body. So why we have nitrogenous waste for excretion to get rid of at all is maybe the first question that we should ask in the excretory system. And so we know that we have nitrogenous things to get rid of. Ammonia is in our urine, right? And it contains nitrogen. So where the nitrogen has come from is the breakdown of the metabolism of proteins, because remember the amino group had nitrogen in it, and nucleic acids, because we remember the nucleotides had a nitrogenous base. So when these things are metabolized, the nitrogen is toxic to our body. So our body has to get rid of it by excretion. And animals dispose of those toxic nitrogenous waste in different ways. Obviously, we're going to focus on the way humans get rid of it. So in the crash course, he goes on about what is and is not bird poop, if you would like to look at that, or how fish get rid of it. We're going to focus on mammals here because humans are mammals. Humans excrete their nitrogenous wastes that came about from the metabolism of proteins and nucleic acids, both of them containing nitrogen in the amino groups and the nitrogenous bases, in the form of urea. And so urea is what we get rid of in our urine. If we were to take a look at the anatomy of the excretory system before we get into the physiology of it, the key thing about the excretory system, what we're going to really focus on are your kidneys. About 20% of your blood at any contraction of the heart is bound for the kidneys. It gets sent, the blood gets sent to the kidneys and then back because of the function of these kidneys. It ensures that the blood is continuously being exposed to the functions and the filtration of the kidneys and that osmoregulation and excretion that the kidneys do for us. If you were to take a look at this, about once every 20 minutes, your entire blood volume is sent through your kidneys. That is amazing, about 75 times a day. The form and function here, I put a little note. That idea, again, we've got a close connection between your circulatory and excretory systems. Maybe why they cram both of these into the same chapter. Within your kidneys, the key thing we're going to talk about are nephrons. And so nephrons are tiny little tubes, if you will. They're tubes within the kidneys that are the functional units of the kidneys. They're really the key anatomy that allows for the functioning of your kidneys. So we've got many, many nephrons providing a large surface area for efficient function of the kidneys. That idea that we're going to filter in our kidneys. There's a lot of exchange of materials, and so if we have a large surface area, we're going to have a more efficient function. The key job of the functions is to make a filtrate of the blood or to filter the blood and refine that filtrate into urine. And so that's the output of the kidneys, would be urine going into the bladder. So urine as the output drains into ureters, and then the bladder, and then out through the urethra. Like I said, we're going to really focus in on the nephrons. There's a whole lot more going on at the bladder and ureter levels, but we're just going to really focus on the kidneys. And so the kidneys, kind of blowing it up, this is a lobe of the kidney that we're going to talk about. And this tube running through the lobe of the kidney is the nephron. So this is a nephron, and this is really what we're going to focus on as we talk about how your kidneys work. How do they filter your blood and produce urine? The nephron has a bunch of key parts to it. And so we're going to focus on the things that are labeled in black here. We're going to start with the catching mitt of the nephron. The first part of the nephron is the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule is like the catching mitt of the nephron. Inside the Bowman's capsule is a circulatory vessel called the glomerulus. And the glomerulus is designed to put the blood under high pressure and basically squeezes out the filtrate. And so here we have some filtration happening. So we have the glomerulus inside the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule is going to then drain into the proximal convoluted tubule because it's close. So if something's in close proximity, it's the proximal. Then into the loop of Henle. So there's a big hairpin loop down here that's called the loop of Henle, named after someone named Henle. Check out the biography in the crash course of the excretory system if you want to know more about the name. Then the distal convoluted tubule, convoluted for twisty bit. It's not in your notes, but it is in some of the other video resources. And then on from the distal tubule that is at a distance, get it? So proximity, close proximity, distal, distance, and then into the collecting duct. And you have a whole lot of nephrons all joining into this collecting duct. So those would be the parts of the nephron. What is also on here is the close connection between the circulatory system and the nephron itself, because we rely on that for the function of our nephron to actually be executed. So there's some key processes. There's 4 key processes that happen in a nephron. So the first one is filtration. And filtration is what I was talking about with the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. So the glomerulus puts the blood on high pressure, and it's going to squeeze out mostly the liquid of the blood. And so blood pressure forces water and anything dissolved in that water out into the nephron. So it leaves behind cells and large proteins. So that gets squeezed into this catching mitt of the nephron, the Bowman's capsule. The end of it is excretion, and that's ultimately that urine is being excreted. So those are the 2 easier parts of these 4 key systems, right? Or 4 key processes, I should say, sorry. The other 2 happen throughout the rest of the nephron. And so we have what happens at the beginning, and we have what happens at the end, and this reabsorption and secretion is what happens throughout the rest of the kidney. So reabsorption means that things that are in the nephron are going to go back into the bloodstream. They're reclaimed, if you will. So they're reabsorbed back into the body. So back to body. Secretion would be things that are added to the filtrate. Whoops, it's right there. So that idea that your blood can actually add more to the filtrate than was initially filtered out in that filtration process. And so reabsorption and secretion are happening throughout the proximal tubule and the distal tubule and the loop of Henle. So we've got the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule here. We've got the collecting duct here. And the rest of the nephron would be the proximal tubule, the distal tubule, and that loop of Henle. So this is a massive picture. We're going to try and make some sense of this picture in our own sort of way. And so what we're going to do is read through this. We're going to try and capture all of this information in a simplified diagram. So we can look back and read that again. There's a good video there. We're going to start by kind of like what we did with the heart and practice drawing a nephron to kind of go through all these processes, breaking it down so that it's not just memorizing, that you actually understand, hopefully, what's going on. So we're going to start by drawing a nephron. And we're going to draw the Bowman's capsule. And we're going to draw the proximal tubule and the loop of Henle and the distal tubule and the collecting duct. And so I'm just going to fatten this out so it is a tube running through. I'm sure your drawing is going to be neater than mine. All right, so that is a super simplified picture of a nephron. We want to add in the Bowman's capsule. I'm going to do it in red because it's the circulatory thing. And so now I can start labeling all of this. Let's label everything in black that is part of the nephron itself. So we have the glomerulus, the Bowman's capsule, we have the proximal tubule, that's this one here. We have the distal tubule, that's this one here. We have the collecting duct, and we have the loop of Henle. So that's this big long hairpin tube or hairpin turn that goes through the different regions of the kidney. So the key things that are going to happen here, there are 4. So we have filtration happening at the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule as we extract the filtrate. So we're filtering the blood essentially there. And then we have excretion down here. That's after the nephron has done its jobs and it's going to excrete the urine. The other 2 things that we have is that we have reabsorption. So I'm going to do reabsorption in kind of this pinky red color. And we also have secretion. I'm going to do that in blue. And we have this idea that reabsorption and secretion is happening throughout the rest of the nephron here. So we've got the first and the last taken care of, but not everything else. If you can have both of your images up, you can take a look because there are some commonalities in these 3 different regions of the nephron where there's always the same things being reabsorbed. And so let's start with reabsorption. If we take a look, everywhere along the nephron, we are reclaiming salt. So we're going to reclaim NaCl and reclaim NaCl and reclaim NaCl, bringing it back into the body. That is a very precious resource. So that's being reabsorbed from the nephron back into the body. The other thing that we're going to do throughout almost every part is reclaim water. And so this is being reabsorbed in each of the parts of the nephron here. In the video, it goes on in detail about why the loop of Henle is differently permeable to water and NaCl, and it goes on about how it creates a more hypertonic solution. Give a listen to it. We're not going to go into too much more detail on that. The other thing that gets absorbed, if we take a look at both the proximal and the distal tubule, is that we are reclaiming HCO3 minus. Now, maybe you're a chemistry person or maybe you're not. That was the bicarbonate ion. And we talked about that in your respiratory system as being the way that carbon dioxide is circulated in your body or transported in your body. Now that's going to help regulate your pH, right? If we reabsorb that, that's a way that we can control the pH of your blood. And so we've got bicarbonate ion being reabsorbed in both the proximal and the distal tubule. There's another key and precious thing that we want to reclaim here. And so in the proximal tubule, we're going to take back in those really valuable nutrients that are circulating in your blood and are squeezed out from the glomerulus into the filtrate. So we're done all of the reabsorption. So we've done filtration and excretion, they were easy. We've done all the reabsorption. Now we're going to do the secretion. And so the secretion is that adding into the filtrate, all this stuff that like, hey, I meant to get rid of that anyway. So we can add more hydrogen ion. Again, this idea that we can regulate our pH through the function of our kidneys. And so you can secrete hydrogen ion in both the proximal tubule and the distal tubule of the nephron. The other thing that you can get rid of, kind of in contrast to the nutrients, would be toxins or drugs. And so you can excrete those after they are secreted back into the nephron. Over here, you can also help regulate your ion levels in your potassium ions. And so potassium ions can be secreted in the distal tubule. And believe it or not, we've summarized almost everything in that diagram that we were looking at. I have an analogy for the function of a nephron that's different than the video. So I kind of think of it like cleaning out a closet. And so when you go to clean out a closet, typically, if you're going to do a really good job of it, you're going to take everything out. So I have a hall closet with games and weird stuff in it. So if I'm going to ask the kids to clean that out, I would get them to clean everything out. Well, they're not going to take out the shelves and stuff like that. The shelves and other fixed pieces are akin to the blood cells in your blood and those large proteins. They're not going to get filtered out. And so that cleaning out the closet is the filtration. You are going to reabsorb most of the games back into the closet, right? You're going to put most of the good stuff back in, like the nutrients and the salt and the water and the bicarbonate ions, right? That is that reabsorption process. You might also find a stray deck of cards or something like that that you want to secrete back into the closet. The collecting duct or that excretion is really what you're going to package up and send out of the house. So maybe it's the Candyland game that everyone has outgrown or what have you. But that's my analogy for how a nephron works. It's like cleaning out a closet. It doesn't seem like, you know, a really efficient way because you do a whole lot of work, but it does result in the functions and all of this osmoregulation, all of the balancing that needs to go on with the function of your kidneys. So you can read back through the notes here. I've tried to do it, you know, in that picture. All of those words are captured as we went through the diagram bit by bit. The video here, it goes slow and it's like that or the computerized voice, but it is a pretty good summary. So now that we know all the pieces of a nephron, again, back to the hormones, because we don't do the endocrine system, most of us understand the powers of a diuretic. I drink coffee often. It makes me have to go to the washroom. So an antidiuretic or antidiuretic hormone is a hormone in your body that basically regulates the amount of water that's excreted by the kidneys. It's going to regulate the amount of water that is being reabsorbed throughout the different parts of the nephron. And so when your blood becomes too concentrated, i.e. not enough water, antidiuretic hormone is released to increase the amount of water or reduce the amount of water that is being reabsorbed. Oops, did I just say that backwards? Let me just try that again. So when blood's too concentrated, ADH is released. ADH causes the kidney to reabsorb water, decreasing, there we go, and increasing the fluid return back to the blood. If you have antidiuretic hormone, it will have an effect on blood pressure. So there's many blood pressure medications that work as diuretics or block the effects of antidiuretic hormone. So in these ones, I put the questions and I also put the answers. I'm feeling a bit muddled on this, so maybe I'm just going to read them so I don't confuse you or say the wrong thing at the end of this video. So the effect of antidiuretic hormone on blood pressure is that if we have more antidiuretic hormone, that's going to increase the blood volume. If you have more volume in a set amount of tubing, that's going to increase your blood pressure. If you already have high blood pressure and on our high blood pressure medication, you take diuretics to block the effects of antidiuretic hormones. So if you block the effects of antidiuretic hormone, you're going to lower your blood volume and in that sense, lower your blood pressure. So those are a little bit of the applied understanding of the functions of the kidney and a hormone that has an effect on your kidneys. Back to the overall function of the kidneys. So that idea that kidneys maintain homeostasis in two main ways, the excretion and the osmoregulation. These slides are breaking down the osmoregulation and the ways that your kidneys help maintain homeostasis. So the first way that your kidneys maintain homeostasis is helping with the glucose level in blood. So normally we reabsorb blood glucose in that nutrients that are reabsorbed in the proximal tubule. But in the case of diabetes, when you have way too much glucose, more than can be reabsorbed, sometimes you will excrete glucose in your urine. And so if you remember back to the urinalysis sticks in the osmosis diffusion lab, they were urinalysis because they detect for diabetes typically in pregnancy or gestational diabetes. But this is one way the kidneys help maintain homeostasis. So they can help regulate glucose and actually get rid of it, excrete it if you have way too much blood glucose. Not usually. Usually there's a malfunction like diabetes going on. The other way that kidneys can help maintain homeostasis is in pH level. And so when I talked about the what is being secreted and reabsorbed, I talked about the hydrogen ions being secreted and the bicarbonate ions being reabsorbed. And that those levels, how much is being reabsorbed or secreted, can be tweaked to maintain the pH level of your blood. The next way that your kidneys help maintain homeostasis is in blood pressure. So going back to that idea that water is reabsorbed throughout the nephron, if you can control how much water is reabsorbed, you can have an effect on the blood pressure. And so that's another way that homeostasis is maintained. The other one would be salt balance being regulated. So we put Na and Cl being reabsorbed throughout the nephron and potassium ions being reabsorbed, or sorry, secreted, wrong way, in the distal tubule, just to make sure that our blood has the right amount of those ions in it. If your kidneys don't work, it can have pretty drastic effects on your health. And kidney disease can be caused by, again, this interrelation of all of the systems. So, we do study these systems more or less on their own, but it's how they all come together that usually is a better understanding of our health. And so diabetes or high blood pressure, use of painkillers, alcohol can lead to kidney damage. And if your kidneys are damaged, they're not going to function properly. And so kidney dialysis is what replaces the function of kidneys if your kidneys are not functioning. I've never known someone close to me who's on dialysis, but I just find, given the stats that we started out, our discussion of kidney form and function, that they can replace it with, twice a week dialysis or something. I find that pretty amazing. Again, a bit of a throwback, we did use dialysis tubing as our selectively permeable membrane as the model in lab 2. So that does our excretory system, bit of a heavier chapter in that we did both the circulatory system and the excretory system in chapter 28.